Shane, it's not an episode of the Golden Era Film Podcast.
No.
Today, we are ranking Alfred Hitchcock's films from the 40s. Why? Because we are the experts on Alfred Hitchcock's entire career, particularly in the 40s. We have gone through all 12 of Alfred Hitchcock's films through the 40s on our podcast, link below. We survived under Capricorn. We survived Mr. and Mrs. Smith. We enjoyed a few of them as well, to say the least. And we are now going to rank them from 12th to 1st. And the way we're going to do it is we're both going to say our own rankings. We'll start at 12 and work our way down. We'll talk a bit about our opinions on the films. And then based on our averages for each film is where we'll place them, basically. And the final ranking, the official Golden Era Film Podcast ranking of Alfred Hitchcock's films in the 40s.
So are we going to go from ascending order to descending order or vice versa?
Oh, Christ, no, we'll start at the shit ones. We'll start at 12.
Okay, so at 12...
Yeah, God. No.
So at 12 I have Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Probably Hitchcock's only true comedy, at least from the 40s, and it's not funny. It's not what a comedy should be.
Yeah, attempt at
comedy might be a better way to put it. It's not funny at all. The romance, if you want to call it that, is completely unworkable. I mean, they basically hate each other and they physically attack each other on multiple occasions. Yeah, it's not a good film. Don't watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I gave it 2 stars out of 5, which is probably being generous. So yeah, I have that at number 12.
Yeah, absolutely abhorrent film. Terrible characters. Absolutely disgusting ending to the film where they just get back together again, even though they have had the most tumultuous and volatile relationship ever, and it's not funny. I allegedly we're like in the minority for hating this film, but like it's a terrible film. But I don't have it in 12th because I have the film that put me to sleep 3 times in 12th, Under Capricorn. Yes, you may have noticed on our episode of the Golden Era Film Podcast and Under Capricorn that I probably didn't speak much. That is because despite watching it in the middle of the day, Under Capricorn legitimately put me to sleep multiple times. It is that insanely boring, truly boring film, boring characters. His final film of the 40s was genuinely like a marathon to get through. Oh, Christ, did I hate this film. I would rather watch a terribly written film with terrible characters and terrible CGI and terrible this and terrible that is like morbidly fascinating than a big, lavish, boring period piece where nothing of interest happens and Hitchcock's already done it better with his first film of the 40s. But we'll talk about that later. So far, in your ranking, in 12th is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and in 12th for me is Under Capricorn. Funnily enough, I have Mr. and Mrs. Smith in 11th. So I think it's safe to say that Mr. and Mrs. Smith is going to be pretty low down in the official rankings. What do you have in 11th?
In 11th, I have The Paradine Case, which might surprise Harry. Listen, I didn't like Under Capricorn, and we'll get to that too, but I think the reason that The Paradine Case is so low for me is because it should be a film that I like. I love a courtroom drama. I love a kind of a mystery thriller kind of thing. It's just a damp squib from start to finish. Bad performances, bad script, boring film. Yeah, it's not a good film. It's not Hitchcock at all. That is anywhere near his best, and it is the last film he also did with David O. Selznick, which was a partnership that would promise to be pretty fruitful with Rebecca, which we'll talk to later on. But then, as the decade would go on, would kind of less and less mileage to get out of that partnership, and yeah, it would end with this kind of this film, which it's not a good film at all. I gave it 2 stars out of 5 again, and I just did not like The Paradine Case. What about you? What's your number 11? Well, you've said number 11 is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Why is that, Harry?
Because Mr. and Mrs. Smith is not funny, and it's meant to be a comedy. Yeah. It's a terrible film. Hate it so much. And funnily enough, I have The Paradine Case in 10th. Yeah. So unless you're doing something crazy here, I assume we have the same bottom 3 but in a different order. For me, The Paradine Case was also just incredibly boring. Gregory Peck cannot save this just slog, this absolute slog. And as I said in the episode of the podcast, Gregory Peck even said himself that he reckons Hitchcock himself was bored making the film. What does that have to say about the film itself? If the guy making it was even bored of it, whilst making it. He could have still changed stuff, but he was that bored that he just put it out anyway.
The parodying case has, again, go back to the podcast, or maybe don't. It might be a better, idea.
Yeah, if you want to hear two people shit on a movie, go listen to our podcast on the parodying case.
It has the hallmarks of what should be a good Hitchcock thriller, but a completely bad execution. Anyway, let's not harp too much on. Yeah, you're right to say that I have under Capricorn intent.
Yeah.
It narratively and plot wise and set wise, costume set design wise, it shares a lot of similarities to Rebecca, which is the first Hitchcock film of the 40s, but way worse execution. Like I didn't despise it as much as you. I mean, I didn't like it at all, but I didn't despise it as much as you. It didn't send me to sleep or anything. But it did take me 2 goes to finish. I'll just say that. I had to kind of stop it and watch the rest the next day in case I did go to sleep. So that'll tell you something. That's Ingrid Bergman's worst performance that I've ever seen her in, albeit the script isn't very good. It's Joseph Cotton's worst performance that I've seen her in, again, albeit the script isn't good.
I would agree.
The only saving grace about Under Capricorn, I'd say, is the great set designs and the great costumes, which if you're a period fan, you'll probably appreciate. But yeah, it's not for me. It's not my genre at all, and it's not a good film, in my opinion.
Right, I reckon that I am going to catch some heat in the comments for what I have at 9. At 9th, I have Spellbound. I did not enjoy Spellbound very much. I think it is a good film with some really great moments and some really boring moments. I think it averages out as a good film, but would I ever want to rewatch it again? Because I've already watched it twice now in my life, and I think that's once too much. No. The Salvador Dali scenes are incredible. I think he did an amazing job, and I think how they kind of tie it all into the ending is good. Again, Gregory Peck is fine. He can't save it though. It just doesn't work for me. It's twice now I've tried to enjoy Spellbound, and twice I have failed. However, I would without any hesitation tell you that if you want to watch this, you will definitely get something out of the Salvador Dali dream sequence. It is phenomenal, but it is also not that much of the runtime. There's also lots of stuff in this film which I'm like, very much take it or leave it, but I suppose to truly enjoy the Salvador Dali dream sequence and to understand the meaning behind everything, you do have to watch the full film. So I won't just say just watch the dream sequence, but yeah, I personally won't be watching it again. What do you have in 9th?
So in 9th I have Lifeboat, which I know you were a bit higher on than I was. I just thought this was a bit of a slog to get through. It's actually the one episode of Hitchcock's 40s arc that I wasn't able to kind of share my thoughts on. Last minute kind of thing that popped up. But anyway, yeah, to me it's a slog. There's not too many likable characters, if any. I get the circumstances were pretty extreme. I mean, you're in the middle of the ocean, kind of on a lifeboat. You're unsure whether you're going to survive or not, so I get that. But yeah, to me the characters weren't, not even that they weren't likable, but they weren't interesting enough for me to even care whether they survived in a way. So that's just me. But I gave it 2.5 stars. Like I wasn't upset that I watched it. Like it's worth a watch if you're a Hitchcock fan, especially technically. He does some really nice shots, and it's probably the first of 3 maybe movies where it's in one kind of location where obviously the ocean's obviously the ocean is the ocean, but the boat that they're in, they can't move from the boat. Obviously Rope, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, and Rear Window are a couple of other films that I think he kind of perfected that kind of film a lot more as he went on, that small kind of enclosed location. But anyway, yeah, long story short, I didn't like Lifeboat that much, and yeah, I have it in mind.
Yeah, in 8th I have Suspicion. Suspicion is similar for me to Spellbound, a film which is occasionally boring and occasionally brilliant. I think one thing that this film has, which is also excellent, is the motherfucking milk scene. It's so great. It's one of the best. It's one of the best really short sequences that Hitchcock probably ever shot. I think it's just perfect. I like Beaky. Beaky's a character who exists. I think it does all the like mysterious murder chat quite fun, but ultimately I do think it's somewhat forgettable. I think it's pretty stereotypical Hitchcock, but not necessarily in a good way. It feels somewhat formulaic at times as well for me. Suspicion is a totally solid Hitchcock film, which if you really like Hitchcock, I'd say is worth a go, but if you're not really into Hitchcock, I probably would say that you could definitely get away with giving it a miss.
So at number 8, I've got Spellbound. Again, didn't like it that much. I gave it 3 stars, and it's the romance is probably on the more positive side of Hitchcock's. Like there were some proper duds when it comes to his romances in this decade. This is one that for me worked a little bit better between Gregory Peck and Ingrid Bergman. Mainly Bergman, if I'm honest, carrying a lot of it. It's an interesting enough film. It's kind of like I was engaged with it. I was entertained enough by it without ever feeling like I'll never watch the film again. Let's put it that way. I think again there's films where if you want to watch certainly a Bergman Hitchcock film, there's several. Well, there's at least one film which I'll talk about, which you should watch above it. But yeah, it's the Salvador Dali sequence does slap, as Harry said, but otherwise there's not a lot here that I'd say you need to go out of your way to watch.
And then what do you have in 7th?
So in 7th I have Suspicion, which you just talked about. Again, I liked it up to a point. Some fun, like you said, murder talk. There's some fun. Is he or isn't he wronging this guy, Cary Grant's character? Again, it's a good Cary Grant Hitchcock collab. It's a good John Fontaine Hitchcock collab, but it's nowhere near the best collab from either Grant or Fontaine. So from that perspective alone, if you're kind of looking for a Grant Hitchcock collab, there's several other films that you should watch. But yeah, notice that the milk scene is brilliant. It's probably one of the best Hitchcock scenes of the decade, really, in terms of how well executed it is. But yeah, it's not the most memorable Hitchcock film. So again, it's one that I'm happy enough to have seen, but will probably not revisit.
Yeah, in 7th, I actually have Saboteur. I think that we are now, for me at least anyway, entering the good films. Saboteur is a good thriller. It's an underrated thriller. Wrong Man thriller from Hitchcock it's a formula he's done a couple of times, obviously with the 39 Steps being one of his better ones. This is basically a remake of the 39 Steps, but in America. And yeah, I think maybe if I had a better lead actor, I think this would be a bit higher, but this is a really underrated Hitchcock thriller for me. Saboteur is in a good way, a pretty stereotypical Hitchcock thriller.
Yeah, I've Saboteur number 6, so one place higher than you. Again, co-sign everything you just said. Really good kind of wrong man thriller that he has to try and find out who this person is that's been sabotaging him the whole time. Robert Cummings is the lead actor who you just mentioned. I wasn't massive on his performance either, but it's good enough. I think it's pretty funny actually that Hitchcock was kind of criticising the performance in the film, but then he would later cast him in Dial M for Murder, which is one of my favourite Hitchcock films. So didn't stop him from going back to the Robert Cummings well. Yeah, it's a good, effective kind of thriller for that time, and again, it's one of several films from Hitchcock which deal with that kind of wrong man theme, wrong place, wrong time. Has to get himself out of the hole. Yeah, it's a good little World War II flick if you haven't seen it. It's a pretty good time.
Yeah, it's 6, maybe a little higher than it should be, but I quite enjoyed it. I have Lifeboat. I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed the all in the one location. I enjoyed the development of the characters. I quite liked that some of the leads were unlikable. It felt more real and gritty for me. That some of the leads were, dickheads basically, and the way that they treat the German characters and the way Hitchcock treats them throughout the film is fascinating. I just thought the way that he slowly but surely ends up commanding the lifeboat is really interesting. And then the end with the young boy is, I think it's a great ending as well, because we get a glimpse of them all being what they're like in day-to-day life, and they're all really nice to each other and cordial and introducing each other. And then all of a sudden, another German shows up, and straight back to dickhead mode. Everybody's horrible again. I don't know. I really like that ending. I think Lifeboat is For me, anyway, I think it's one of his more underrated films again from the 40s. I very much enjoyed it. What do you have at number 5, Shane?
At number 5, I have the second film from Hitchcock to come out in 1940, which is Foreign Correspondent. Again, I love the kind of the war correspondent elements of this. There's 2 or 3 really fun set pieces. There's a really cool car chase. There's a cool scene set near like a windmill, really suspenseful, where you kind of someone has to cower and duck and try not to get caught. And again, you're trying to fish out some Nazis. That's always something that Hitchcock would love to do. Even going back to the 30s, that's something that that's something that he had some success with. Again, probably not the greatest lead performance that I've ever seen from Joel McCrea. It's fine, it's decent, but it's not amazing. A better actor could have probably done a better job. And the romance itself is a dud, like several Hitchcock films have been, like I said. But overall, it's a good flick. It's a good war film. It's a good World War II film. Probably one that not necessarily everyone would have seen from Hitchcock, but it's a good film. I definitely enjoy it. I gave it 3.5 stars at the time, and yeah, it's probably a rating that I'd stick with.
Yeah, I also have it at 5. Everything you said, I agree with. And also, I think the umbrella scene is pretty cool as well. Yeah, Foreign Correspondent's a good film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. At 4, then, I have Shadow of a Doubt. I really enjoyed it. It's one I'd seen prior to the podcast, so I had a bit of experience with it. I love how unsettling it is. I love how unsettling Joseph Cotton's character is. You just don't want to be in the room with him. And some of the shots, particularly towards the end, whenever we kind of really know what Joseph Cotton's character is about, and how some of the characters who also discover what he's really about, how they interact with him, how it's shot is amazing. Particularly the staircase scene with her standing in the doorway. I really like Shadow of a Doubt. I think it's a great thriller. And yeah, it's my number 4.
Yeah, it's my number 4 too. Again, Joseph Cotton's one of the actors from the 40s who I'm sure some people will know, some people probably won't, but he's been in some of the best films from the 40s. This is a really good Hitchcock film, one of his better ones from the 40s, like we said, in our opinion at least. It kind of deals really well with the cult of personality that we've probably started to see more and more in recent years, where someone's so charismatic and so like outwardly kind of, he fits everything you would think you would want from that kind of a personality, that you're almost willing to, people find themselves drawn so much to this guy that they almost ignore all these other elements that are just staring them in the face. So it's kind of advanced for its time when it comes to that kind of stuff. Teresa Wright's performance as his niece is really good too. The way she kind of slowly starts to cotton on to the fact that this guy isn't really who he says he is, and she's probably given a lot more of an arc than certain female characters would have been given at the time in Hitchcock films and in other films. She's a pretty smart character, one of the smartest characters probably in Hitchcock's 40s arcs. It's a really good thriller, good performances, really compelling stuff, and it's not actually set in World War II, which is one of the few films which isn't really influenced by World War II at the time. So from that point alone, it's Hitchcock kind of doing something else at this time. Yeah, it's Shadow of a Doubt. It's a good flick.
Yeah, and then at 3, I think we probably have the same number 3 as well. At 3, I have Rebecca. I think it's amazing. It's the first film we covered on the podcast. It does all the gothic stuff so well. We've also covered The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I think Hitchcock's German expressionist influence is very much felt in this film. He obviously learned a lot of his trade in Germany. And Rebecca is so moody, it's so gothic, it's brilliant. The romance is great. Laurence Olivier is great. Joan Fontaine is great. It is a great film. And of course, Mrs. Danvers. Judith Anderson is one of the best villains in Hitchcock's entire filmography.
Yeah, co-sign everything you just said. I have Rebecca at number 3 as well. Great film, won Best Picture at the Oscars. Hitchcock's first collaboration with David O. Selznick. He was obviously the guy at the time when it came to producing movies. So it's a famous film for a number of reasons, but it's great set design. Manderley looks so spectacular. Brilliant, like moody score, moody scenes, moody lighting. Everything he clearly has been influenced by German expressionism, as Harry said. Great performances, brilliant villain. Yeah, everything about this film was really, really good. It's a film worth going out of your way to see for sure.
And then at number 2, I have what I'm assuming is your number 1. I have Notorious. Incredible spy thriller from Hitchcock with Nazis in Brazil. It's amazing. The performances, again, I'm just going to say it, the performances are amazing, the direction is amazing. It's such a rewatchable film as well. You could watch Notorious so many times and get stuff out of it all the time, similar to what I have at number one. I think you could watch this film so many times and still enjoy it. The characters are excellent. The pacing is so rapid, it's great. There's constantly stuff happening, and then there's constantly subtext. Again, similar to what I have at number one, where characters are saying one thing and meaning another, and it's just acted brilliantly, it's written brilliantly, it's directed brilliantly. Everybody involved in Notorious does a brilliant job. Shane, what do you have at number two?
So at number two, I have what again is probably your number one, which is Rope, which is just an amazing film. Such a unique structure where it's the one take thing. Obviously, he's not one take. He's hidden the cuts in there, but it plays as if it's a one take film. Really interesting, great performances from Farley Granger and the other guy whose name is escaping me at this moment. But yeah, great performance, like you said.
John Dahl.
That's him. Yes, thank you, John Dahl. So great performances from John Dahl and Farley Granger. Again, like you said, subtext that's going on. So you're seeing one thing and then really one other thing's going on. Jimmy Stewart is just amazing in that film. The writing's out of this world. It's Hitchcock really at peak Hitchcock in terms of what he's doing with the camera. So many good visual flares, the way he's kind of using the camera to show you one thing and then to hide other things from you. Yeah, it's a brilliant film.
Yeah, and then of course the number one I have Rope. It's the only film on the podcast for Hitchcock that I've given 5 stars to, because I think it is a legitimately perfect film. I think Hitchcock does the one take thing, as we say, perfectly. I think the performances are perfect. I think the subtext is dealt with perfectly. And as I said on the podcast as well, watch this film and then watch it again and just look at Farley Granger in the background. He is so great in this film. His character just progressively becomes more and more erratic, and it's so great to see. His performance is brilliant. The way he quivers his lip is... I love this film. I've always loved this film. It's one of the first films from the 40s. Probably the first film from the 40s I ever saw. I saw it when I was far too young to see it, because there's some murder in this film, and some pretty deep conversations, particularly between the 3 main characters played by John Dahl, Farley Granger and Jimmy Stewart, about how murder is something that can be committed by people of a higher intelligence, and the class difference between those who have a high IQ and a low IQ. I just adore this film. It's less than 90 minutes. It looks brilliant. It's brilliant. The ending's brilliant. It's just perfect. I love Rope. Rope is great. Rope is great. Shane, what's number one?
Yeah, number one for me is Notorious. Like I said on the podcast when we covered it, it's a film that I watched and really liked it the first time, and then when I watched it again the second time I was like, bam, that's a 5-star film. Went of whole star up in my review. Just every single scene is I was just so compelled by every single scene. The romance is just incredible. It might be one of my favourite romances. In fact, it is one of my favourite romances from really any film, let alone a Hitchcock film. Cary Grant and Ingmar Bergman, they literally look like they are in love with each other. In every single scene, they look like they just are drawn to each other. Claude Rains is an incredible villain. What an actor that guy is. The locations look so beautiful at the time, like in Brazil. I'm not sure exactly where they shot, but wherever they shot, it's so great. There's a big house, which again, Hitchcock and big houses in this decade is something we'd get a lot of mileage out of. Again, he's dealing with Nazis here, trying to root out a bunch of Nazi spies. You've got moles, you've got just everything you would want from a Hitchcock film. I call it at the time probably the easiest film to watch to get into Hitchcock films, when it comes to the themes and the stuff like that he's playing with the themes and the stuff that he does with the camera and the performances that he manages to get from his actors. To me, it's a quintessential Hitchcock film. It's one of the films that I would point to towards anyone looking to get into Hitchcock films. I love it so much. To me, it's a 5-star film. It's a film I'm going to watch many, many times throughout my life, I hope. So yeah, that Notorious is my number one.
A few moments later.
Shane, you don't know what the order is. I have totted it up. So the way I've done it is, based on our ranking, it'll get a point. First place gets 12 points. Last place gets 1 point. Based on that, it was a fairly concrete list of 12th to 1st. There was 2 ties. So those ties were separated by our average ratings for them. So, Shane, 12th place Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Sounds about right to me.
In 11th place, Under Capricorn. In 10th place, The Paradine Case. In 9th place, we might get some heat for this, it's Spellbound. In 8th is Lifeboat. In 7th is Suspicion. In 6th is Saboteur. In 5th is Foreign Correspondent. In 4th is Shadow of a Doubt. And 3rd is Rebecca. Drumroll, please. In 2nd place is Rope. And in 1st for our 1940s Alfred Hitchcock ranking is Notorious. That is the official top 12. Any other top 12 you see is a lie. That is the real top 12 Alfred Hitchcock films from the 40s, all ranked from best to worst, or in our case from worst to best, because we started with the bad ones. So yes, that's our ranking. Thank you very much for following us for so long now on the podcast covering these 1940s Alfred Hitchcock films. And yeah, we're basically going to be covering a whole lot of random stuff now for a little while, at least until we have a little bit of a concrete slate anyway in October. Until then, we're going to kind of just go back and forth and pick a few films each as to what we want to cover. So yeah, thank you very much for watching our ranking, guys.
Thanks for anyone who has watched any Hitchcock films or has watched any of our podcasts from Hitchcock. And yeah, now, as Harry said, we're probably going to get into some more well-known stuff, some more famous films from several different decades and several different directors. So yeah, that's the plan.
Next week's episode of the podcast is Stalag 17.
Yeah.
And when I say next week, I mean this week, because I reckon this will go out on a Monday. Maybe a Sunday. I don't know. The next episode's Stalag 17. And we'll see you there. It's Billy Wilder. It's great. We've already watched it. We've already recorded that. It's great. Thank you very much. We'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.